Atlas's Persona 5 Royal is a complex story that explores a wide range of social, cultural, and philosophical topics. Identity exploration and the idea of masking are two of its most important themes. Characters struggle with their true identities throughout the game as they cope with the masks they wear to deal with the pain from their personal histories and societal expectations. This idea is present throughout the game's mechanics, plot, and visual symbolism, in addition to the actions and personal difficulties of the characters. The concept of hiding one's true identity plays a major role in the character arc and the overall Revolt story, implying that self-acceptance and liberty can only come from accepting oneself as one truly is. Hello everyone, my name is Fejiro and this is cozyfeji, and on this channel we cover a variety of things such as video essays, reviews, JRPGs, and all things cozy gaming. Now I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this quite a few times on this channel, but Persona 5 and the Persona 5 universe of games, specifically Persona 5 Royal, is probably one of my favorite JRPGs that I've experienced in recent years. Fun story, and I've mentioned this before on this channel, that Persona 5 was probably one of the first JRPGs that I truly knew that was a JRPG and wanted to know more about the genre. I first read about it back in 2018 through its anime. I know, a very unconventional way to get into the franchise, but that was my experience. And when I first watched the first episode, I was really intrigued by the premise, so I wanted to do more research and find out that it's actually based on a video game. And so I decided to watch the entirety of this walkthrough of the Persona 5 game. I was watching it as if it was like a TV show of mine, watching parts every so often throughout the days and getting a little snack and enjoying more about the story and the characters and to see how they grow and to obviously see how it all ends out. And at the time, I did not have any, honestly, gaming consoles at the time, so I really wasn't gaming like I am right now. And so in 2022, I finally got to experience Persona 5 Royal on my Switch, and truly is an experience that every fan of JRPGs and just games in general should experience. However, there are so many aspects of this game that I love that come down to the characters, the social sim aspect, and of course the story. And with the story, there are so many themes that are explored into this game. However, today I want to do a deep dive on the themes of identity and masking in this game. Now, I know that these themes are not new to just Persona 5 Royal. They're also played into many other games as well in the franchise, but I wanted to talk about Persona 5 because that's the one that I've actually have experience with and have played through its beginning and to its end. So I definitely wanted to talk about those particular themes of identity and mask. And I also wanted to talk about how Persona 5 has impacted me as a person. Now, I know in the characters that we follow are in high school, and of course, when you're a teenager and specifically in high school, you're trying to discover yourself and figure out who you are as a person. You're finally entering the stages somewhat of adulthood, but people still view you as a child and very naive and still very new and green to the world. So there's a lot of mixed emotions and feelings, and everything just feels like super heightened because you're a teenager. You feel things, I feel like, a lot more than you do as you get older. However, just because you're a teenager doesn't mean that those lessons and themes that we come across in this game does not apply to me today. I feel like no matter what stage you are in your life, whether you are a teenager, in your 20s, or well into your 60s or whatever, we're always constantly changing and growing and learning about ourselves every day. I'm entering a new stage of my adulthood, and I'm still trying to figure out my life and who I am as a person and how I perceive myself and how society perceives myself. And I think how Persona 5 Royal and the whole Persona 5 franchise of games explore those themes are really interesting. And today I wanted to do more of a deep dive on that. So without further ado, let's get into it. The metaphor of the mask lies at the core of Persona 5 Royal. The Phantom Thieves personas, which are actualized versions of their true selves, let loose in a realm where reality defies expectations, are symbolized by the actual masks they wear in the metaverse. These masks, however, also represent the characters' metaphorical facades that they wear in day-to-day life as a reflection of societal roles and expectations that stifle their true selves. Every phantom thief feels pressure to follow social norms in the real world. The fight to preserve a socially acceptable identity while stifling goals, desires, or characteristics that could result in rejection or punishment is symbolized by these masks. For example, after being falsely accused of assault and put on probation, the main character Joker is made to play a submissive and obedient student. Although he presents his persona on the outside, his actual nature, which was made public in the metaverse, is rebellious and driven to uphold justice. The protagonist's conflict between his exterior and his inner beliefs is a reflection of the larger battle that each character has in trying to balance their inner selves with their positions in society. This subject critiques society as a whole, not just certain personalities. In Persona 5 Royal, social institutions punish those who break from the norm and promote conformity while discouraging the development of uniqueness. In order to preserve their own power, corrupt authority figures in the world of the game influence and dominate others, forcing many of them to put on symbolic masks in order to exist in a system that requires obedience and submission. As a result, masks in this game represent the conflict that exists between a person's true identity and society, as well as the urge to conform to social norms. So what's really interesting about our cast of character, or the Phantom Thieves that we follow in this game, is that society views them all differently and has expectations and roles for them that they should play. For example, Makoto, she's your straight A student, very does well academically. People have high expectations of her. She comes from a big family of really renowned people. Her sister is a prosecutor. Her dad worked in law enforcement. Everyone has expectations of her of being a very goody two shoes, follows everything to the book. But of course, as we follow through and her story and learn through her arc, we learn that she's a lot more than that. She's more multifaceted in that, and has her moments where she's very naive, doesn't know about how to engage with social norms that most teenagers go through because everyone expects her to be such a grade A, nice, studious person, that she's a lot more to that. And you see that as she grows into her character and accepts her persona as a more rebellious, very naive, rambunctious, and very loud person that she is, rather than the demure, quiet, reserved person that people expect her to be. Also kind of similar to that is Haru, who is a character in the main game that we don't really get to flesh out, but I think other games such as Strikers and maybe I think Tactics Tactica explores more, but I know Strikers explores more of that. But in Persona 5 Royal, people expect her. She's a prim, proper lady of the very high class, rich girl. She's a rich girl, rich goody two shoes girl. People expect her to have a lot of money, that she may look down on other people because she comes from money and thinks she may be hot shit, but has her own goals and aspirations. She loves to farm and all agriculture and loves all that intricacies that comes along with that. She's a very sweet and kind, loving person that when given the opportunity, seems like would make a really great friend. And again, because society expects her to be a certain way, she doesn't really get to explore that aspect of herself and what she truly wants and what she wants out of the world until we get into the later parts of the game and she encounters her persona, which I think is really, really beautiful thing to see. And again, all of our other characters in the Phantom Thieves explore and go through that as well. So what I'm trying to say is that all of them have expectations, societal expectations put upon them, that obviously can be very unrealistic to some and can be very detrimental and harmful to these characters. And then we get to see them grow into their own and figure out where they play in society and what they expect from themselves, which I think is such a beautiful thing. Characters who exist in both the actual world and the metaverse highlight the difficulty in discovering and expressing who they truly are. In the metaverse, a character's first act upon awakening to their persona is to rip off their actual masks, signifying the embrace of their true selves and the rejection of their outward appearance. This turning point in the story signifies the characters taking back control of their own lives and accepting aspects of themselves that they had either suppressed or kept concealed out of fear of social criticism. Every palace in the metaverse symbolizes a person whose sense of self has been tainted by pride, lust, greed, or power. Palaces are expressions of twisted desires. The phantom thieves, on the other hand, overcome the constraints placed on them by society norms and face their own warped self-perceptions. For instance, An battles the objectification and sexualization she encounters in the actual world as a stunning woman. Her persona, Carmen, represents a strong, sensual, independent character in the metaverse, giving An the ability to take back control of her identity and reject the labels that society has imposed on her. In a similar vein, Ryuji deals with the hurt of having a delinquent record and failing in the real world. His persona, Captain Kidd, stands for disobedience and the unwillingness to let other people's opinions of him determine who he is. Ryuji regains a sense of purpose and self-worth by accepting his persona and removing the disguise of an unsuccessful athlete and criminal. These changes are essential to the identity theme because they show how the characters have to face their fears and social labels in order to discover who they truly are. Again, with the societal expectations of people, I think what's really interesting about each in the cast that we follow is that they get to take back what society put upon them and put them into their own, and they get to have more control and agency of how they perceive themselves, which again is something that everyone should experience. They could truly be unabashedly themselves on their own accord, on their own terms, which is something that takes a while for a lot of people to get to, whether that be when you're 16 or 60. Being able to truly be 100% yourself and at your own accord is truly something you cannot be a feeling that cannot be matched, and that I think is honestly so exciting and exhilarating to see these characters come to terms with themselves and be 100% themselves is something that I think everyone should be awarded to at any point in their life. Although taking off a mask in the metaverse represents freedom and self-awareness, Persona 5 Royal's take on masks are not wholly negative. Masks are frequently used by characters as a defense mechanism that enable them to live in dangerous situations. For instance, Yusuke, who comes across as cold and distant at first, wears a mask of indifference to deal with the abuse he endures at the hands of Madarame, his mentor. His mask highlights the dual nature of masks as barriers to authenticity and shields against harm. It allows him to cover his sensitive inner self from the emotional and psychological assault he receives. The game does, however, also highlight the shortcomings of these protective masks. Characters who adhere too closely to their masks run the risk of forgetting who they really are. For example, following the trauma of her mother's death, Futaba puts on a mask of introversion and avoidance and isolates herself from society. Even though at the first this mask shields her from the more emotional suffering, in the end it traps her in a vicious cycle of fear and self-blame. She cannot escape her self-imposed seclusion unless she faces her past and embraces who she truly is. As a result, the game represents masks as sophisticated instruments that have the ability to both restrain and protect people. These characters must not only take off their masks, but also recognize when they are using them for concealment and when they're using them for survival. Persona 5 Royal makes the argument that striking a balance, that is, learning to function in social situations while adhering to one's genuine identity, is a better path to true emancipation than completely rejecting masks. What I find really interesting about the whole idea of masks is how they could also be kind of like a double-edged sword, in that there's always that saying, there's always a right time and place for everything. Of course, you want to be 100% authentically yourself, but of course there's going to be certain situations, certain time, and certain places where you're going to have to pocket that in or reel it in just a little bit in order to, again, help survive and all to help situations, help yourself in that situation, which I find very, very interesting how each of those characters, how they apply that into their everyday and how we as people apply that to our everyday. Like, I know myself as a Black woman, I know that there's certain aspects of myself and how I perceive myself and how people perceive me is going to kind of hinder or maybe push myself to act certain ways. And that's definitely something that we as people always have to learn all the time, every day, which can sometimes be exhausting, but again, that's kind of how life is, isn't it? Persona 5's Royal's identity and mask themes are ultimately connected to the larger story of rebellion in the game. Along with fighting dishonest authorities, the fandom thieves are on a quest for self-acceptance and self-discovery. The protagonist battles the internal mechanisms that impede their own development by opposing the external institutions of society that enforce conformity. They are rebelling to change the world, but they're also rebelling to restore their own identities. Persona 5 Royal portrays identity as flexible and complex in this way. The personas that the protagonists assume during the game are dynamic deceptions of who they truly are as they mature and change. The idea that identity is dynamic and constantly molded by relationships, experiences, and decisions is reflected in this progression. The path of self-actualization is symbolized by the fandom thieves' capacity to accept their own selves while navigating the masks they wear in society. I think a huge major takeaway from this game with the themes of identity and the mask and masking is that we as humans are such multifaceted people. We cannot pigeonhole and put people in certain boxes and expect them to live their way and live their life that way because society's told them to do. We are so much more to that. Humans are not just set a certain way. We all have different emotions and feelings and how we perceive things and how we experience things all shape us in different ways. No person's life is going to be the same, and I think that's what's really important and what's expressed in Persona 5 Royal and Persona 5 is how different and beautiful we are all are pretty much. And I think that's something that should be addressed and should be learned, and to a huge takeaway from this game and the themes mentioned in this game. Persona 5 Royal offers a poignant remark on the challenges of self-discovery in a conformist society through its exploration of identity and disguising. The game examines the conflict between personal identity and society expectations through the metaphor of the mask, showing how people frequently conceal who they really are in order to survive in a society that aims to define and control them. The game does, however, also convey a message of hope. People can accomplish both personal liberation and significant social change by facing their anxieties, accepting who they truly are, and rejecting the constraints placed on them by society. Ultimately, Persona 5 Royal implies that real freedom is found in the capacity to traverse masks while adhering to, rather than in rejecting them. Overall, Persona 5 to me means a lot and has helped me a lot into being a lot more reflective and retrospective in myself and learning who I am as a person and how I perceive myself and how I walk in this world, and not allowing society control and pigeonhole me into a certain aspect of myself and being unabashedly myself. I would love to hear you guys and your take on what you thought of the identity and masks and ideology that Persona 5 expresses and talks about and explores in this game. If you guys enjoyed this video, do not forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and I cannot wait to see you guys in the next video. Bye!